How's it, everybody? This is um, this is probably going to be two or three parts because it's a really long story. It took place over the course of many years and it involved many people, and it was a haunting um, from a Tahitian ancestor, and I had to get help to get rid of it. Um, and just trying to get rid of it was really an ordeal. But so it started to where one night I had a dream that I had a piece of hair in my mouth. And everybody knows what that feels like, right? You have a piece of hair in your mouth, and you pull the hair out. Well, in my dream, I pull the hair out, and it's a black piece of hair, but there's no end to it. And so I keep pulling it and pulling, and I can feel it coming up through my throat. And it's the most awful, distressing feeling of having this hair that is in the hair felt like it went all the way down into my gut, into my naau, and it didn't end. And I pulled and I pulled and I pulled, and it just kept coming, and I could feel it until I woke up. And then I started dreaming it, not real frequently, but it started coming in maybe every week or so. I would dream this. And so the hair then became a braid. Now, it became one of the braids from a lei niho palawa. And what that is, it is a lei that is made up of thousands of strands of human hair, always black. And they're braided into these very, very, very fine braids. And there's just a whole bunch of them, just a ton of them. And in the middle is a whale tooth hook. And so the only people that owned something like this was Ali'i, was somebody of high noble rank. So not everybody had these. This was, if you were common, you didn't have one of these things. And they were considered full of mana, of course. And so they were, they're in museums, they're that special. So the second time I dreamed it, I felt a piece of hair in my mouth, but when I pulled it, it was one of the braids from this lei. And again, I pulled it and pulled it and pulled it, and it didn't end, and I could feel it. And now, because it was a braid rather than one single hair, I could feel it even more. I could feel it when I pulled it out. I dreamt this continuously for years. But what happened was, shortly after I started dreaming about the braid, it changed. It started getting, the hair was lighter. It started getting like a light brown. And then the braid, as it came out, was no longer a braid, was no longer this perfect black little braid. It was now a matted hair, like a dreadlock. And when I pulled it, it irritated the inside of my throat, but it still didn't end. And time went on. I kept dreaming it like that. Pretty soon the matted hair was getting bigger. It was getting bigger. So when I pulled it, it started shredding the inside of my throat, up through my, what is this, your esophagus? And then it started getting caught on my teeth. Now I'm talking about a succession of dreams. So it went from irritating the inside of my throat up my esophagus to getting caught on my teeth and pulling the teeth out when I pulled it. But the thing is I had to pull it because I couldn't get it out. It had to come out, and I had to pull it. There was no choice in it. And it progressed to where it wasn't just pulling out my teeth. Now, when I would pull it, it was woven in the teeth and in and out through the actual tissue of the gums. So as soon as I pulled it, my teeth came out and it left my gums in bloody shreds. It was terrifying. It was terrifying. And I used to cry out when I would go to sleep. Kevin had to shake me awake several times. I was scared to death to go to sleep because it didn't stop, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And I wasn't telling anybody, there was nobody around me that I was telling this story to. So what happened was, I had been taking Hawaiian language, and I needed 2 years of Hawaiian language. And I was up at Windward, and I had a really crappy Hawaiian language teacher. And in that particular class, I had a classmate named Paula Funga. And you guys know her. She's a musician, Hawaii musician. And a friend of Paula's had taken a bunch of photos. And they were beautiful black and white photos. And they were out taken somewhere. I don't know where they were, but it was gorgeous. It was trees and everything, but they were striking. And I'm a painter. And so I asked Paula, can you get me a copy of this one picture? Because I want to paint it. It was just powerful photo. She got me the photo. Well, that Hawaiian language class was so bad that I actually went to Kapiolani Community College during the summer and took both years, first year and second year, over because I was so lost from this Kumu teacher. Kumu, he was terrible. I went to retake it because I didn't feel like I learned really anything. It was so confusing. And he had a bit of I had the wrong color hair, is basically what it was. He didn't like me. He wouldn't call me by my Hawaiian name. He called everybody else by their Hawaiian name. I told him my Hawaiian name, but he preferred to call me one of those Americanized names, where they take an English name and they turn, like Robert gets turned into Lopaka, or one of those kind of things. He wouldn't call me by my name. He was about as indifferent as I've ever had as far as teacher goes. So, but I guess it was good, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have been able to get help. So I took these other classes, and the kumu that I had at KCC, one of the things she wanted us to do was she wanted us to do our genealogy. And so we had to do our genealogy, and I did my Hawaiian side. And I used to come in early because I was coming through from Kailua and the traffic was horrendous. And, so I'd get in there, half hour, 45 minutes before the class started. And I kept finding my kumu, in front of my genealogy chart. And every morning I'd find her there and I'd say, Kumu, why are you looking at that chart again? Why do you keep looking at it? And she commented that the names, they're so powerful. You don't understand how powerful these names are. And my tutu came from a really big family. There were lots and lots of kids. So I knew the names were strong. But like I told her, I said, it's not my name, Kumu, I mean, that's my family. It's not me. And she said, you can't separate. You don't separate, you come from this line. You are your genealogy. So, okay. So after being in her class for a while, I was so afraid of this dream. And I thought, you know what? Maybe she can help me. Maybe she can help me. So I told her about it. And she called a gal, of all places, here in Hilo. And this lady came to Oahu to help me. And she also brought her teenage son with her. And one of the things was I wasn't supposed to say anything about what was going on. Wasn't supposed to mention any names or anything like that. And so we met this woman for lunch. And she told me, she said, you're being attacked by your Tahitian side. And I said, my Tahitian side? I said, which was confusing because I was in Olelo Hawaii class, Hawaiian language class. And she said, no, she goes, go back. She said, do you have your Tahitian chart? And I said, yeah, I had just gotten it. My cousin Buddy had sent it to me 2 days earlier, but I hadn't had a chance to open it and look at it. So I had it. I just didn't look at it yet. And she said, okay. She goes, go back and open it up. And she said, go back 7 generations. And she said, and this is the name. And this is the person that's attacking you. So I said, okay. And she told me, she said, you're going to have to get rid of this person because he's not going to stop. He's not going to stop. And I said, well, what does he want? What does he want? Why am I being attacked? I don't understand. Well, okay. So she told me that, I was able to pick things up, that I, spiritually. That's true. So I asked her, I said, what does he want with me? And she said, he wants you to finish what he was doing. And I said, I don't know what he was doing. I don't know. I've never heard this before. And she said, okay. She said, well, we're going to do a couple of things, but I want you to check the chart and everything like that. She said, no, I'm going to go home and I'm going to work on sending this person away. And I said, okay. And she said, she goes, this is your Tahitian side. She goes, and I don't want it to sound cliche. She said, but he was particularly savage. And she said, I don't like, this is a Hawaiian woman. And she said to me, she said, I don't like that word because that's a word that has been associated with lots of indigenous peoples. And so she said, I don't like to use that word. She said, but that's who this person was. And so I said, okay. So she said she was going to go home and she was going to do some things. And there were certain things I had to do. And I said, okay. So she left. I went home. I checked my genealogy. Went back seven generations. And there's that name. It was exactly the name she said. And so I did the couple of things that she told me I needed to do. And my kumu called me into her office a couple of days later, and she said that this woman and her son, who was a teenager, were doing things here in Hilo to get rid of this person. And they were getting attacked when they would go to sleep. They were getting attacked, and they were waking up with bruises and scratch marks. And I believe it was the kid that woke up with a dislocated shoulder So these spirits were, because it wasn't just this one guy. It was this guy was part of. See, the Tahitian side is an Ari'i line, so they had bodyguards. They had, depending on who they were, they had like. Anyway, you understand. It wasn't just him; it was his entourage, I guess you could say. So they were getting, this woman and her son were getting attacked, and they were getting left physical marks on them. So she had to do some things to get this person off of her. About another week went by, and she came back, and we were talking about, there were some other things that were going on. And one of the things was, I was doing this painting of Paula, and I would paint on this, and it was, there was a face that was coming through. And oil paint is not like acrylic paint, or once you put it up there, it's dry in, 15 minutes. Oil paint stays wet a while. So I would paint, and I would see this, it was a man's face that was coming through. And so I would wipe it out, start all over again, do this, start Paula's portrait. It was a portrait. And this face kept coming through. And so I would wipe it out, and at nighttime, I never ever cover a wet painting with anything. But at nighttime, I would cover this thing because of that face that kept popping up. And I'd come down in the morning and I'd take it off, and the face was more pronounced. It was never completely a solid face, like somebody had actually painted a full face there. It was the shapes and the shadows and the placement of the features. And so I'd come down in the morning and I'd take the cover off of it, and that face was there. And so this was really scaring me. And so I told Kumu, and I told this woman. Now, this woman came back 4 separate times for me. And one of the things I had to do was I had to get rid of this painting, and I had to take several things down to the ocean to wash them because they were part of the Tahitian line. And they had to be cleaned. She said that you've got to wash them, you've got to cleanse them, and you've got to take them in the ocean. So I was doing that stuff and moving things around in the house where she was telling me to move it, take it out of there, get it away from this, doing that kind of stuff. One of the things she told me I had to do was I had to burn this painting. And I had to take the ashes from this painting up to Wa'ahila Ridge. Wa'ahila Ridge is, there's all these rumors of Wa'ahila being haunted, of having lots of spirits out there. But in all honesty, I really never heard anything about it. All I knew it was between 2 valleys. It was between Manoa and Pololo Valley. And it was this ridge. And she said, you've got to burn this painting. And so Kumu comes over one day, and because this woman said, you're attached to her, you're attached to this, you have to do this with her, and you have to go up to this ridge with her. But she didn't tell me where I'm going to have to bury this thing. She said, I've got to burn this painting, and I've got to take the ashes from this painting, and I've got to bury it up on top of Wa'ahila Ridge. But she didn't tell me where. And I said, well, where do I go? I need to get this right. this is not a joke, you know, and it hasn't been a joke. And she said, oh, are you kidding?